So what makes deterrence work? Deterrence only works if all the parties involved believe in it, believe it'll work. We usually think there are two main components of deterrence because they feed an understanding of credibility. So what goes into credibility? Usually it's will, like political will. Do I believe a decision maker will take the action necessary to impose this devastating consequence? The other thing is capability. Do you have the actual capability to follow through on the threat and to do so convincingly and reliably? So those are the two big pieces. If you don't have either one of those pieces, the threat isn't credible. If the threat isn't credible, far from resulting in a more stable outcome that's based on this principle of deterrence, what you have is actually something far less stable, because all you have is a series of empty threats or a series of bluffs that just sit there waiting to be called.
There are a lot of factors that go into the success of deterrence, but I think a few can be highlighted. First are capabilities, right? If you're going to make a deterrent threat, you have to be seen to have the capabilities to carry out that threat, right? If you cross this line, I'll punish you in the following ways. You have to have a means to punish. I think intention or credibility of commitment are important, right? If I don't seem to be committed to an ally and I say I'm going to use nuclear weapons on their behalf if they're attacked, that might not be very credible to an adversary. So you have the capability to act, you have the intention or the credibility to act. I think having a status quo is important, right? If you have an agreed status quo, right? If you cross this line, I will take action. I think that helps. In terms of clarity, right? So exactly where that line is, there it starts to become a little murkier. On the one hand, clarity helps, right? This is exactly where the line is. If you don't cross that line, we don't have a problem. On the other hand, that creates incentives for the other side to walk right up to that line, right? So in a sense, you want a line that's clear enough nobody is mistaken, but just fuzzy enough that people are uncertain how close they can get to the line. That's a lot harder to imagine in practice than theory, but I think that's probably the ideal set of circumstances. There's enough ambiguity to induce caution, but not so much ambiguity that people misperceive what's going on.
There's actually two different components to effective deterrence. Firstly, I have to threaten an adversary, and I have to say, if you do something to me that I don't like, I'm going to hit you back in a way that will outweigh any of the benefits that you hope to maintain. But secondly, I also have to assure an adversary. I have to say, if you don't hit me, then I won't punish you. And so, as I say, the first thing is deterrence has to consist of a threat and a promise, an assurance, and both of those have to be there. Secondly, effective deterrence has to involve both the means and the capability of being able to inflict damage on the adversary that will outweigh any benefits the adversary hopes to gain. And that can often be a very hard thing to assess. I mean, how do I convey my willingness to an adversary? How do I make those threats credible? How much pain do I have to inflict on an adversary? Those are potentially very difficult things to assess. Where this becomes difficult is that if I make deterrence over-effective, if you like, if my threats are too threatening, then that may actually be misinterpreted by the adversary, not as a defensive gesture designed to preserve the status quo, but an aggressive gesture. And this is where I think all of these different trade-offs between these different elements come in. That, focusing too much on the threat part risks inadvertent escalation. And it's why you can't focus on any one of these elements, strategic stability, effective deterrence, whatever it is, in isolation. You have to look at these things holistically.